There's a kind of philosophical, almost mystical side to comparing Disney World and Disneyland, where, I'll be one of those people that says that Disneyland still has that kind of magic touch of, Walt's fingerprints and has a charm, an intimacy, personal warmth that Walt Disney World doesn't have.
That is Seth Kubersky, and you're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Hey there, it's Dan, and you're listening to episode 214 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. As we roll into December, I am here this time with Seth Kubersky, who you probably know as the co-author or author of many books done through the Unofficial guides. He also writes for various publications, is on the Attractions Magazine podcast, YouTube, so many things. He's been on the show twice before, and we referenced it early on in this interview. Episode 5, Seth was nice enough in October 2015 to come on the show and then returned in episode 47. Both times we focused on Universal Orlando. This time is different. We're going to talk a lot about Disneyland, and the new Unofficial Guide to Disneyland is out, and we talk about recent additions like the Adventureland Treehouse, what's coming in the future like Tiana's, and then further out with the Avengers E-Ticket attraction. We also talk about Seth's recent trip to Hong Kong to experience the World of Frozen, which just opened at Hong Kong Disneyland, and a little bit at the end about what's on the way for Universal Hollywood. This was really cool, so I want to get right to it. Here is Seth Kubersky. Well, I'm here today with an author, podcaster, writer extraordinaire, has written so many books about Disney, Universal. This is his third appearance on the podcast, though it has been quite a while. He was actually on episode 5 of the show, if you can believe it. Today, our focus is the Unofficial Guide to Disneyland. We're going to talk about a lot of fun stuff with theme parks. It is Seth Kubersky. Seth, thank you so much for returning to the podcast.
Dan, it has been way too long. Thank you for that very warm introduction. I feel very hyped.
Yes. Can you believe it's been 8 years since the first time you were on?
I cannot. It has been, I think, since the second and last time I was on, it's been at least 5 years. And that's crazy how we're both still doing this all these years later.
I don't know what to think about that, especially in my case. But regardless, I'm excited to talk about a lot of fun stuff with Disneyland. But before we even do that, I saw that you recently had the chance to travel to Hong Kong and see World of Frozen, the new land in person. So I'm curious just up front, like, what was that experience like, and what did you think of it?
It was a mind-blowing, once-in-a-lifetime experience. I have to shout out Matt Roseboom at Attractions Magazine for tapping me when their offer came through from Disney to send someone to attend. It was, first of all, I don't recommend the flight to anyone, especially in coach. It is an expensive flight. It is a long flight. Basically worked out to about 24 hours each way. One stop going one way and then 2 stops going the other way. And with a 13-hour time difference from here in Orlando, that's jet lag that you don't underestimate. Don't underestimate. But if you put that aside, it is a strange and marvelous and magical and kind of bizarro park. You can tell that it was originally built during the Paul Pressler era of build it on the cheap in, opening in 2005, but then has been greatly expanded, extended, metamorphosized over the years most the best metaphor for it visually is how they took an exact model of the original tiny little Sleeping Beauty castle in Anaheim and just plopped a giant new castle on top of it. And it's ambitious and in some places really beautiful and other places really kind of clunky and janky is the word that kept coming to mind. And it is kind of like a through the looking glass experience for a domestic a US Disney parks person to walk something that looks so familiar and then you realize it's not familiar at all. Like they have a Space Mountain that technically is a clone of Disneyland Space Mountain, but you walk straight into the side of it. There's no ramp up to the top and then long queue going. You just walk straight into the side of the big cone and all sorts of weirdness like that. It was a great park to spend a day in. It is not a multi-day park, even with Frozen, which is spectacular. It's still a nice add-on to a visit to Hong Kong, which is a world-class spectacular city. And if you're going to go all that way, spend more time in Hong Kong than you do in Hong Kong Disneyland. That's my advice.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, because even what I've seen, it's just they've added cool stuff like Mystic Manor and then they have Toy Story, but then they have it's a very odd collection. But I'm curious too because I've watched online videos of the Wandering Oaken Sliding Sleighs coaster.
Yes,
and in one sense, I don't want to. I'm curious for your thoughts in person because, as you know, online videos are always the best way to have ideas about attractions. But it looks stunning and beautiful. But what's the ride experience? What was it like for you to do this? Because I have some comparisons in my head, but I don't know if I'm seeing it right.
It was kind of beat for beat Hagrid's hippogriff ride, the flying hippogriff at Universal. But with surprisingly more G-forces, much better visuals. Honestly, like if you like Hagrid's, or I'm sorry, not Hagrid's, but if you like the flying hippogriff at the Wizarding World, I don't see why you would complain about this because it basically it's the same sort of thing plus 1,000 times. People line up for an hour for Gadget's Go coaster in Toontown at Disneyland, and that I think is shorter and a lot less forceful than this. This has got some unexpected kick around the corners. It is only 60 seconds, and maybe 30 seconds of that is actual, gravity time. But that's a fun little ride. And it's perfect for who it's intended for. You have to look at that ride in context of the entire park that has, as you mentioned, Mystic Manor, which is a kind of slightly scary haunted mansion-esque ride that, doesn't have a height limit, but might be a little too much for some little kids. And you've got Big Grizzly, which is basically their version of Big Thunder Mountain. Again, a height requirement, too much for little kids. And Space Mountain. This was their first thrill ride appropriate for kids who were like 75 centimeters. Everything else was over 100 centimeters. So, intended as its first kid starter ride, they could have just thrown it up and not put a mountain around it, and that would have kept everyone's expectations really low. But as the Imagineers explained it to us, it's actually multifunctional. The queue, the ride, and the Playhouse in the Woods Theater, which is this interactive show that happens indoors with projection mapping that's, modest but very well done. That all takes place inside this whole building that the mountain is just surrounding. So it's actually a really clever use of space. And yes, it is the most over-decorated kiddie coaster on the planet, but I don't think that's a reason to hate on it. Like, I don't think it was like, oh well, why didn't they just spend that money making it twice as long or 3 times as long? It's like that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is it's your kid's first roller coaster.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because the thing I was always thinking of it more was in terms of Seven Dwarfs Mine Train without the dwarves. And I think people overthought that a little bit.
Yes, it does have a cute little minimal animatronic at the beginning, very similar to that bowing hippogriff
Hmm.
on the hippogriff coaster, which is a step above, Goofy's Barnstormer or any of the other rides that I would compare it to. You can't underestimate the head chopper rock work and coming around the curves next to the waterfall. It feels a lot better than it looks on a POV video. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, and I did do Flight of the
I
Hippogriff recently, and I remember it is really that's even pretty well themed. But I remember
Yeah,
coming around going, "Wait, that's it?" Because I'm
yeah,
used to.
yeah.
But this looked cooler than that. But that is an interesting comp I hadn't thought of before.
I will also say that a lot of people have dismissed Frozen Ever After as just a clone of the Epcot ride. I feel like after riding them both many times and talking to the Imagineers, the Epcot is like the rough draft version. The Epcot is the D-ticket version. This is the E-ticket version. If nothing else, it's not a recycled Maelstrom trough. It's a brand new track and boats built by Intamin that are built for capacity. They can do almost 2,000 people an hour, which is the one in Epcot
Yes.
would dream about doing
No.
2,000 people an hour. The drop is serious. It's like almost twice as high, and it's a double down. Not only does your butt catch airtime, like there's a lap bar there for a reason, but my phone caught airtime, flew off
Oh
my
gosh.
gimbal, and landed back in the boat. Thank God. That would not have been good to be stranded in Hong Kong without my phone, which had, all of my travel stuff on it. So, yeah, they plussed the heck out of that ride. For everything from the having the real sculpted faces on the human characters to better lighting to just better pacing. It's like a minute and a half longer, and there's not like a whole new scene. It's just every scene gets a little bit more room to breathe, and you don't feel like you're just being rushed through it. I thought it was really a great improvement in every way, and I wish they could go through the Epcot version and overhaul it to bring some of the effects and the sets up to that standard.
Well, that's good to hear because I looked at them I did not look at them side by side, but I did watch
Mhm.
the new one. And, the main thing I thought was like, again, it felt like this could just be me not watching it side by side, but the scenes seemed to be a little more detailed. I felt like there are parts of the Epcot one that don't have much there. And this seemed just a little
Oh,
more
you are absolutely
well
right.
done with the background and everything around you just felt kind of like it had extra life to it.
Everything has more depth. Even the queue has a lot. Things that were just one little window or one small building in the Epcot queue are stretched out to a whole corridor or a whole little village square. And the same is true. All the sets in the ride. My favorite improvement is in Epcot at the end of the backward section. It's like they just sort of forgot to paint a whole
Yes.
corridor, and you're just like in a black hallway for a while. And here it's like, you've got, this transition from the ice palace into the snowy mountains, and you instantly see up above you the northern lights and shooting stars. And it's just a much more immersive environment in every way. The miniature castle that you see at the end has so much more depth to it, and even getting into that final moment with Anna and Elsa and Olaf singing, it's just you're not like slammed right into it and then right out of it. You get enough time to really see the scene. Better pacing overall really shows you like what a difference editing in the theme park sense can make in terms of timing.
And you think the new animatronics, like, I think they look better.
Oh, way better in person. I remember when the ones in Epcot opened, and opening day they looked really good. And we talked about this with the Imagineer in the queue. We took a tour, and he said that they were an experiment that worked out great in the lab. worked out great on opening day, but the problem was that it was such a delicate balance of the aging of the materials, the aging of the projectors, keeping the projectors constantly in focus and at the right light temperature as they age, that it wasn't realistic for their maintenance teams, as hard as they tried to keep them looking the same. So I don't think it's like it. He pointed out that the animators loved it because they could do full facial expressions that they couldn't do with mechanics at the time. But now that they've got these all electric servos that are a lot smaller and lighter weight and take a lot less power than the systems that they were using, 10 years ago. The stuff that we've seen in Hondo Naka, that's like in all of the animatronics that they have in the Frozen ride. So, like, when you look carefully at Anna and Elsa, it's not just that their mouths are opening and closing anymore, but there's actually kind of like a dimple, a pinch to their cheeks where their face kind of can lift up into a smile as they talk that it's hard to totally capture on the video, but it's eerie up front how much more expressive, whether it's having more flexible skin texture or better mechanics, electro servers under the skin. It's some really it's Westworld stuff. It's pretty good.
Well, we're a long way from the faces of the Little Mermaid dark ride. I think we've extended a lot past that those scary, creepy eyes that we used to have.
I still kind of like the projected eyes on Sebastian. Yeah, it's always a moving target. Every time a new advance comes out, we're kind of dazzled by it, and then a few years down the road, we're like, oh, that's not doesn't look quite as good anymore, does it?
All right. Well, I want to make sure we talk about Disneyland because that is one of the books you've had come out recently.
Absolutely. Yes, the unofficial guide to Disneyland 2024 is available now at theunofficialguide.com. And all fine booksellers. Thank you for the shameless plug.
Yes, we're done. No, we're actually going to talk about Disneyland.
I'm out of here.
Beyond that. I've went recently, been multiple times, but just kind of an overall question for you personally. When you compare that to Walt Disney World, what are some of the biggest benefits today to when you visit Disneyland versus where a lot of people are going more to Florida, especially on the East Coast?
Sure. I'm one of those people who lives here in Orlando, but if you asked me, I would rather hop on a plane and go to Anaheim and spend the day there than drive across town, especially if we're talking about going to the Magic Kingdom. There's a kind of philosophical, almost mystical side to comparing Disney World and Disneyland, where, I'll be one of those people that says that Disneyland still has that kind of magic touch of, Walt's fingerprints and has a charm, an intimacy, personal warmth that Walt Disney World doesn't have. My wife always yells at me when I use this metaphor, but I say that Walt Disney World is Walmart and Disneyland is Target or Target. They are both essentially selling the same products, but they are doing it in a way with a different tone and a different kind of feeling that they leave you as a customer. Though, I don't know, haven't been in a Target all that recently. So
I think that metaphor worked really well like 5 or 10 years ago. The last
it doesn't work as well anymore.
Now it's like, are they as different? I don't know.
We do all our Target shopping on the app and literally just park the car outside, let them stick it in our trunk and drive. I haven't been inside a Target in a while, but so that metaphor maybe
still has, like it though. I get it.
Not aged well since the pandemic, but I will say that since the pandemic, visiting both the parks has gotten a lot more complicated, but it's way worse at Walt Disney World than it is at Disneyland. Disneyland's trying to catch up. Recently, crowds have gotten way stiffer. They've added some unwanted new features at Genie Plus at Disneyland. Why'd they need it on the Little Mermaid ride? Why? But for the most part, if you compare head to head, the user experience, the level of friction at Disneyland versus Disney World, I'm still giving the nod to Disneyland as being a more user friendly experience.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, having been to Disneyland recently, I mean, did not love in order to use a Magic Band, having to get the Magic Band pluses, which I found to be kind of stupid. But regardless, I found Genie Plus to be so much more valuable at California,
Yes.
especially at the Disneyland park itself, where I mean, stuff would just still be available and be. So I'm curious, for you, if I sound, I'm guessing you agree, but why
Yeah.
you think it's just so much better there versus in Florida?
I think the number one difference is that in Florida, you have to get up at 7 a.m. You can still do it from your bed, but stabbing that
Yeah.
phone and making that first reservation and creating that expectation where about 50% of the people going to a Disney park on any given day were buying this. I don't know if that statistic is still accurate, but as of a few months ago, that was right. So if half of everyone is getting up at 7 a.m. and instantly stabbing it and getting the Genie Plus for the most popular ride, and you're seeing things like Slinky Dog and Jungle Cruise instantly at 7 a.m. start dispensing things at 5 and 6 p.m. already, versus at Disneyland where you can't do this until you step inside the park, which creates a natural buffer, preventing the system from getting overloaded, and meaning that you can actually get these and use them multiple times during the day. At Disney World, they pretty much admit that if you get three Genie Plus passes in a day, that's about what you can expect. And at Disneyland, I've easily done 7, 8, 9 in a day. So I also feel that they do a better job of managing the intermix of standby versus Genie Plus in order to kind of keep both groups at bay, so no one's too outraged. Whereas at Disney World, they kind of seem to delight in just like stopping and letting 99
Yeah.
people through Lightning Lane for every one person in standby. So I just think the management of it is better, the setup of it is better. Not giving the hotel guests such a preference and priority on the individual Lightning Lanes, not having the same advantage that they have in Orlando. I think they're all ways of just balancing the system and making it more fair and less aggravating.
Oh yeah, I mean, just for me, having bought the tickets with Genie Plus and not having to worry
Yeah.
about it, but then also, like you said, we were there. Even at DCA, I think we got like 4 or 5. I mean, there aren't that many
Oh
attractions,
yeah.
but at Disneyland, and I was with a family of 4. We were not rope dropped to close because everyone got tired. But I
Hmm.
bet you we still used 8 or 9 each day. And if some of the rides
Yep.
hadn't been down, we would have probably even done more. But that was just how it's gone at Disneyland
Well,
lately, unfortunately.
hot tip: when a ride is down is the best time to grab a
Right.
lightning lane. Those multiple experience lightning lanes, when they convert, when you have a pass for an attraction that isn't working, especially if it's one of the big ones like Matterhorn or Indiana Jones or Space Mountain. I've had mornings where I've farmed the Matterhorn because the ride didn't open on time, but they were still dispensing lightning lanes, and you can end up with multiple experience fast passes good the whole rest of the day at pretty much any lightning lane ride. They used to be usable at non-lightning lane rides in Disneyland. I think you can still do that in DCA, but they closed that loophole because it was too good to be able to use it on Alice in Wonderland or something like that. So I think they tightened up on that.
Yeah, they always eventually find the loopholes, but
They find the loopholes, but there are still ones out there, and you can still farm. If you see a lightning lane attraction that is down, but still giving out passes, grab that because when that time comes due, you've got a golden ticket that you can use all the rest of the day.
For sure. Well, I want to ask you about a few new things that have come recently. One
Mm.
very recent, which is the Adventureland Treehouse, which I'm still kind of amazed they did this to have it be inspired by Swiss Family Robinson. I think only at Disneyland for a new attraction. But I'm curious, you mentioned you've been there recently, so I think you've probably
I
seen it,
I
right?
just missed it.
Oh,
I was literally there less than a week before it opened. I was out there during the Halloween season, and got to walk around and take some pictures from a distance, but the walls were still up. Yeah, it was I think less than a week after I exited. But what I'm amazed is that it is only kind of lightly inspired by Swiss Family Robinson. You don't have to really know anything about the Swiss Family Robinson to appreciate what they've done. It's almost like an original IP that's just as much Swiss Family Robinson as kind of Society of Explorers and Adventurers Easter eggs that are kind of hidden in there. But it's good to see the treehouse return to its roots. Pun very much intended. The Tarzan overlay, even when all the effects used to work, was never all that great. And I love seeing the water wheel returned, and also I love seeing that pathway cleared. When they turned it to Tarzan, they dropped a big new entrance in the middle of the walkway, and it really did bad things for crowd flow. So that alone was worth the whole refurb.
yeah. I mean, that might make it almost worthwhile in itself, just because, yeah, I remember going when Tarzan was there. And one, I felt like every time I went anywhere, all I heard was the music from the treehouse. Like that Tarzan music was full on. It was in your head all day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's cool that they've tried to do something different because there were rumors about Encanto and everything else, which
Yeah.
I like Encanto as a movie. But this I feel like is going to just kind of fitting in with some of the other, ones around there that are not so IP themed. I think it
Mm-hmm.
fits really well. But again, especially for modern Disney, for them to do it was very cool, I thought.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that makes Disneyland special is these kind of little C ticket, B ticket attractions that, no one is, other than the vloggers on opening day, no one is going to Disneyland just for the Adventureland treehouse. But these are the kind of like little sub attractions that, actually form kind of core memories sometimes, even more than the big e-tickets do in people's, and bringing back something that reminds them of something from their childhood or even from their parents' childhood, I think is stronger than grafting just another currently popular IP on top of it that's going to age out in a decade.
Well, speaking of IP, an area that I really enjoyed when we were at DCA right before this happened was the Pacific
Mm-hmm.
Wharf area, where it was like I love the bakery tour, which is still there, but some of the places where you can get drinks and food, it just seemed so nice, especially when it wasn't like peak time. And now
Mm-hmm.
that has been rethemed to San Francisco. And I saw they were starting to do it, but hadn't yet. But I'm curious.
Oh boy.
I mean, I'm curious. Again, not big attractions or whatever, so it's not like it still has kind of the same vibe. But how has that changed, at least for you?
Well, I will say there has definitely been a vibe shift.
No.
So, you and I appreciate those quiet little corners
Mm.
of theme parks where you can escape from the crowds and, find a little solace, find a little zen. Um, Theme park executives do not like those spaces because they do not have a very high, return on investment per square foot. They are much happier now because that place is hopping. They have not really added anything of significance other than a Baymax meet and greet. And about half the time, Baymax experiences issues with his batteries and needs to go backstage for a healing hug and can't come out. So, like, if your whole purpose in life is to see Baymax, I would say check it out earlier in the day because he gets his sets delayed or canceled more than your average meet and greet. Other than that, there's nothing new, but they've just brought attention, they've brought energy, and they've brought people. It is always packed now, which is interesting because the restaurants are serving very similar menus to what they did. They haven't radically changed, but I will say that all of the tweaked items, all of the new items that I tried, I thought were really, really good. I thought they were definite improvement. I already loved the Pacific Wharf Cafe for their bread bowl soups. Yeah. And I was a fan of their New England clam chowder, but the new miso clam chowder I think is actually much better. The old New England clam chowder was had a lot of kind of flour and butter flavor, and the new one you get a lot of the smokiness of the bacon and the umami from the miso coming through, and I actually like the texture even better.
Well, I am happy that the food, and even what I could tell, the food seems to still be solid. It's mainly just because even when we went there, like it was earlier, I was like, this is really nice. And then at lunchtime, I was like, so now it sounds like lunchtime is like all the time now.
Lunchtime and dinner. It has turned into a really popular spot. And it's no longer the quiet little pass through into Cars Land that it used to be, which is a shame. But my number one tip is all of the restaurants there take mobile order, and it is your friend. Like I frequently, I sat there and placed a mobile order from my phone and had it before people I saw at the end of the line even got up to the front of the line to order. Make mobile ordering your friend.
Yeah, it helped us there, and Disney World, same, except for at a few places, is very, very helpful. Well, I want to ask you about one that is not there yet, but is coming, of course, which we were there actually on the last day of Splash Mountain, not by design, and oh my gosh, that park, Seth. Oh my gosh.
Did you, they had a similar situation in Walt Disney World with people desperate to be in the last boat for Splash Mountain and making fools of themselves for social media purposes. I was never the hugest fan of Splash Mountain. I do think it's a very good log flume ride, not a ride that I would ride every time I visited unless it was really hot out, and then I would use the single rider line because I wouldn't wait in that line when it was very hot out. I do hope the single rider line survives the conversion to Tiana's.
I hope so too. Can I ask you a random Splash Mountain Disneyland question?
I can give you a random answer. It might not be right.
Has it always gotten you more drenched than in Florida? Because when I went, I don't know if there were water levels were just off because it was the second to last day is when I went and rode it. But I got so drenched in 60-degree weather, and not on the end, Seth, on the middle, go down and go uphill. I've ridden Splash Mountain in Florida a bunch of times, literally water over my head. Is that something about Disneyland's version, or is that just near the end, they're not trying?
Disneyland has a different boat setup than Disney World. We've got the side-by-sides versus the single riders. That double dip down into the laughing place I think you're talking about is definitely susceptible if your boat is loaded front heavy.
We were.
You got the weight up front and not in the back. That one will get you. They're both the luck of the draw. I know the big final drop has over the years had various amounts of splash on the bottom intentionally during summer season. They sometimes turn it on, but that's not much fun when it's 60 degrees out. I can empathize because when I was at Universal Hollywood for Halloween Horror Nights, just at sunset, just as Halloween Horror Nights was about to get started, I decided, I'll just jump into single rider line for Jurassic World because you don't get that wet on that ride. I got seated in the front corner and hit that rogue wave on the mid-ride little drop and spent the entire Halloween Horror Nights walking around with wet socks and wet underwear.
Yeah, that was
0 out of 10. Do not recommend.
Yeah, Jurassic World was closed when I was there, which I was disappointed, but that saved me from another uncomfortable day.
It saved you from a soaking, but it was worth it to see that animatronic. The I-Rex at the end is truly, other than maybe the I-Rex that they have in Beijing Park that chases after you. That's best animatronic I've seen.
Well, I wanted to ask you too about Tiana's, just based on everything you know, how interested you are. I know you mentioned that Splash isn't wasn't like a favorite, but how
Yeah.
interested are you in Tiana's? And based on what you've heard, how cool does it sound to you?
I think some of the marketing that they're doing on it is, overemphasizing the co-op and the food ingredients angle. I don't think that really is what excites Disney fans. I think they should pay more attention to the fact that they've got the original voice cast back recording, new versions of the songs, recording dialogue, and it's going to be animatronic heavy. From what I have heard, this is not going to be another screens ride. This is not going to be something with minimal animatronics. And I also hear that they're not just reskinning the old America Sings.
What?
They're going to finally let them rest in peace. I mean, those war horses, they're literally, built back in the
Yeah.
60s. Some of them have survived, and they deserve a noble retirement. They deserve to go to that farm where they sent your puppy as a
Oh
child.
gosh.
Sorry, didn't mean to bring up bad memories. No, those animatronics are, from what I hear, not just going to be recycled yet again, but they are building new animatronics, and a whole bunch of them. They're not going cheap. So, and also I've seen really exciting things about the way they're going to use lighting and projection mapping to bring the area to life. I really enjoyed the food that I ate at Tiana's new restaurant, which was the French Market. It still looks more or less like the French Market with a little, extra decoration. But, their jambalaya is great. They've got a good vegan gumbo that I can recommend if you are not a meat eater. And the only thing that I didn't love was the lemon icebox filled beignet, because the hot beignet met the cold filling, and it just kind of all leaked out everywhere for me.
That doesn't sound.
That was
so
a little
good.
bit of a letdown. Everything else I've had on that new menu is good. So if the ride's as good as the restaurant, I'll be happy.
Excellent. Well, another thing that is coming here, which may not be as exciting. Well, I mean, it can't really. It's building from a low mark. Is the new version of the Paradise Pier Hotel. The new version of that, the Pixar Place Hotel. I've never stayed at Paradise Pier. When we went, we just stayed at the Hyatt House, which is very highly rated in your book and was awesome, I have to say, which you can walk from. But I'm curious, do you have any hope that this new Pixar Place Hotel will, because the thing is, they're still going to charge less than Grand Californian and Disneyland, but still a lot. I'm just wondering if it's going to help out. I'm sure it'll draw more interest, but make it a better hotel.
Gee, I am very familiar with this hotel, and I will be gentle in what I say because my company, the Unofficial Guide, we have DVC points, and so I stay there rather often. It's not its first makeover. It might not be its last, but it certainly is not a new hotel because this hotel predates Disney. It is a very non-Disney hotel that Disney purchased, back before California Adventure was built, and has tried to slap a new coat of paint on it every 10 years or so. And I hope this coat of paint peels slower than the last. From the outside, the only thing that really makes it Toy Story is the bright primary colors that they've kind of slapped on the exterior. And there's, some character to the lobby with the Luxo Jr. Lamp statue. But this is pretty much a standard business convention style hotel that just happens to be located across the street from Disney. But if you are looking for something that feels like a Disney resort, even though they've added Finding Nemo characters to the rooftop pool, they don't even have really any Disney theming to the only restaurant in the hotel. They've given it over to a chain chicken and waffles restaurant. So, if you want it to be immersed in Disney, that's not the hotel I recommend, for sure. And it is cheaper than the Grand and the Disneyland Hotel, but it is not cheaper than hotels that are on Harbor Boulevard, whose rooms are just as big, and who are a much shorter walk from the front gate of the park. The one caveat I will say, the one kind of ace in the hole that they have is the combination of one, access to early entry. Getting into the theme parks 30 minutes early can be a huge advantage if it's a busy time of the year. And number two, they do have a private entrance directly into the backside of California Adventure for Paradise Pier, Pixar Place guests. And that is a huge plus, except for the fact that they always kind of understaff the security and the turnstile people there at early entry. So depending on how close up you are in the line, it might actually take you longer to get into the park and to your first attraction of the day from that gate than it will just walking the long way and going in the front entrance. At the end of the night, though, it's a great bonus to be able to just walk straight out after World of Color when everyone else is going out the front of the park, and you just go out the back and cross straight to your hotel. So that is a big plus.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure, even some of those hotels on Harbor, which are very nice and stuff, getting there kind of in the evening when people are leaving,
Oh yeah, that crush of people exiting the park can be really intimidating. Yeah. Especially if you got a kid in a stroller or someone who is disabled. Yeah, that can be really unpleasant.
Well, I'm done talking about something that's a little unpleasant because, I'm curious about some things that might be coming in the future. One, I think is because they showed a commercial again at Destination D23, which is the Avengers E-Ticket King Thanos attraction for Avengers Campus, which I enjoyed Avengers Campus, but I think it definitely needs another attraction. My big question, I'm interested how excited you are, but when are we ever going to see this, though? That's kind of my big question, because they still are kind of slow rolling it, which we're also seeing in Florida. It's not just a Disneyland thing, but am I optimistic in saying maybe like 2027? Is that too late or too soon?
I don't think 2027 for a attraction of the scale that they are implying, that they are hinting at. There is a good little chunk of real estate behind Avengers Campus, tucked behind that Quinjet. That is enough for a sizable e-ticket attraction, especially depending on what kind of attraction they're going for. The little bit of concept art that we've seen implies something that is a vehicle that is emotion based with screen based elements. But I have been watching very carefully the Zootopia POVs that have just come out within the last 24 hours from Shanghai. And I think that's a great example of how you can do a trackless dark ride that feels a little more dynamic than a Ratatouille or a Mystic Manor, that's got a good mix of practical sets and also video projections, but then also has a lot of really expressive animatronics. And I would love to see some kind of combination like that used in an Avengers context. I'm hoping that whatever it is isn't purely a simulator ride, because in Hong Kong they've got an Iron Man experience simulator ride that is just Star Tours 3D, right, except with a Robert Downey Jr. impersonator, and it ain't great. It doesn't have any of the personality or the rewritability of a Star Tours. I know at one time there was some very ambitious plans for a jetpack ride that was, you would be in a vehicle that would break apart into smaller vehicles. Disney's wanted to do like a jetpack ride ever since the early conceptions of the Space Pavilion in Epcot, and have never managed to figure out a way to make it work. I guess the closest thing we'll ever see is the Kuka arms at Harry Potter. I've got my fingers crossed. Will it take another 4 years? I hope not. Will it take at least another 2 to 3? Probably. So I would not delay your Disneyland vacation. And it's possible that all these plans will get reshuffled and thrown out the window if the Disneyland Forward plan gets approved by Anaheim government, because that will reshuffle all of their plans about what can go where.
Yeah, and that's my last question on Disneyland. It relates actually to kind of Bob Iger's strange Avatar hints about what's coming, and kind of using that for Disneyland Forward, like I think you mentioned in the book, but then also just what is going to happen? Like, I mean, if people don't know, I'd love to know really briefly kind of what Disneyland Forward is, and you reference things might change. I mean, what kind of things could change?
So there is very, very detailed planning documents with things like noise tests and environmental reviews. If you want to do a deep dive, you can Google this. It's all publicly accessible. But the too long didn't read is that Disney wants to get permission to kind of rezone their property. Right now, they have specific spots that are hotel has to be here, theme park has to be here, retail here. And they want to be able to just take all of the land they own and mix it all together, which would give them the ability to kind of remake the west side of their property with the parking lots, the surface parking lots surrounding the Disneyland Hotel and Pixar Place Hotel, and fill that in with new theme park attractions, which could either be a whole new theme park or extensions, new lands expanding beyond the borders of the existing theme parks. They've put out a lot of concept art that all has to be taken with a grain of salt. They're all placeholder ideas that were the Imagineers that we talked to in Hong Kong were like, don't take any of those Disneyland Forward ideas as gospel, because we're sort of filling in what it could be, not saying what it's going to be. They do say in general terms that they're looking at, I think, up to 16 attractions, and they've kind of broken down the possibilities. It would be a range of big outdoor thrill rides and large scale shows and dark rides, pretty much everything you would imagine in a modern theme park. And they've floated ideas of importing attractions that they have in other parts of the world, Frozen being one of them. But there's also ideas about new Avatar attractions, not necessarily clones of the one we have in Orlando. And they've also, if you look carefully at the plans, you can see an outline of the Black Panther statue that's the guardian of Wakanda. You can see things that may never happen and are kind of just there to give you an idea of what could be there. But between that and the rebuilding of the Toy Story lot and adding new parking east, it looks to totally transform and expand what Disneyland offers without changing what their actual borders is.
So interesting. I feel like if that really gets approved, it's gonna get so interesting, but also I'm sure going to take a lot of time. But still, it could be an exciting next 5 to 10 years.
It will be a long process, but they have said that they want to spend $60 billion on their parks around the world over the next 10 years. And Josh D'Amaro, when we saw him in Hong Kong, said, hold on, there's a lot of things coming. 60 billion will go a long way. So, and I know that they are planning on spending a lot of that in Disneyland. I would not be surprised if they spend a lot more of that in Disneyland, especially on a per park basis, than they do in Walt Disney World.
It's going to be exciting. I mean, for me, I want them to spend money at every park, but I understand that actually in Disneyland, given the crowds I saw, that resort seems like it could use a lot more. But speaking of crowds, I also, on my last trip, went to Universal Hollywood, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the Nintendo Land, but I've got to say that park needs a lot more things to do, judging from my experience in the lines over like early June. And one of the things they're doing is this new Fast and the Furious coaster, which I am baffled by because you got the hills and the escalators, and I don't understand it, but I'm curious what interests you about this and how do you think this is going to impact the park maybe?
This Fast and Furious coaster, which is about as confirmed as it can be. We have permits. People have even made fairly detailed recreations of what it will look like in CGI that you can find on YouTube to get a little preview. It's going to be unique in the sense that it uses high-speed launches with rotating cars. That they'll be able to, control which direction you're screaming as you drift around the corners. And this is, I think, kind of like the biggest mea culpa in theme park history, where a theme park built a ride that no one wanted. Fast and Furious Supercharged out in Orlando. Which is neither fast nor furious. Discuss. Kind of like what we would call a brand withdrawal. Where you take something that the fans of a franchise that have given you billions of dollars in box office receipts desperately want, a series of films about driving fast in cars to feel like you are driving fast in a car and not just sitting in a tunnel on a bus. Finally, they are putting you in a car and making you go fast. The combination of the launches and the rotation, and as you mentioned, the extremely hilly terrain is, I think, going to make a really unique coaster. I think in some ways it'll be comparable to the Velocicoaster, but the spinning element is going to add a whole new angle to it.
Yeah, and also they said they could turn the cars. I mean, again, I heard this from Alicia Sella.
The rotation.
You can rotate it so that it helps with noise, because they have a big problem with noise there. And that's fascinating that they have, because they got to think about, that's one of the reasons they don't have like outdoor big coasters at that park, is because you have residents who don't want to hear that.
Mm-hmm. They have some very wealthy neighbors who do not like having a theme park there, even though that it's been there longer than most of them have been alive. But yes, they have put up barriers and done studies. When I was there were some speakers set up to do noise tests with artificial screams. But yeah, they're going to use every trick in the book to try to confine the sound bouncing around the mountain, because it's if you haven't been to Universal Hollywood, it's on the top of a freaking mountain, and sound does carry, especially on a clear day there. The only bad thing about this coaster coming is that it has exacerbated the problem that you mentioned, which is that there's not enough things for the people in that park to do. We lost two big stage shows, the special effects show and the animal actors show, which were very well done and were long time traditions of the park, going back many decades, and most importantly sucked up big crowds. And yes, there are simply not enough attractions in that park. Secret Life of Pets is a lot of fun, but it's relatively low capacity for the park's only family-friendly dark ride, to the point where they have to use a virtual line a lot of the time. The whole park definitely needs an expansion. They're adding 2 hotels, or at least are planned, coming in the not too distant future. And with more on-site guests, they're definitely going to need more things to do.
Yeah, I mean, Nintendo, it was cool, but it's hard to even get in the land, and it's so small. And when it's crowded, woo, that's a lot of people.
My advice with Nintendo is that when they are offering the upcharge early entry, it is worth every penny. That's the only time you can really enjoy a lot of the interactive games in the land, in an efficient way without fighting other people for every punch block. I really loved doing the challenges and competing against Bowser Jr. I think it really adds a repeatability, a replayability, that once we have a larger version of it in Orlando that has a little more elbow room, I think that'll be really great. But it is definitely cramped and confined in the Hollywood version.
Definitely. Well, Seth, I could talk about this all day. That Universal question, I think, is a good tease for at some point in the future. We should talk about Universal Orlando and Hollywood on a whole separate episode. But As of now, I would love for you to let people know where they can find you online and about the many books that you're involved with.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, theunofficialguides.com is the home for my books, The Unofficial Guide to Universal Orlando, Unofficial Guide to Disneyland, Unofficial Guide to Las Vegas, and I'm also a contributor to the Unofficial Guide to Walt Disney World. So we cover all of the bases, and the 2024 books are all on sale right now. And you can also find me on pretty much every social media platform at The Unofficial Guides or at S Kubersky, Skubersky.
Well, awesome, Seth. It had been way too long, and I'm sure it will not be as long next time. Thanks so much.
Yes.
This was great.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, that was a lot of fun. If you're interested in my past episodes with Seth, they are from quite a while ago and a little rougher. Go to tomorrowsociety.com/podcast. You can find those episodes, so many more, including a bunch with Len Testa. If you are a fan of the Unofficial Guides and touring plans, those were also a lot of fun to record. If you're a fan of the show and are looking for ways to support it, there is an excellent way to do so through Patreon, where you can get access to some really cool perks with just a small monthly contribution. I do bonus episodes every month about what's going on currently, looking back to the past, a lot of fun stuff, and it really helps to make a difference with keeping this show going. Go to patreon.com/tomorrowsociety to learn more. I always love hearing from you. Reach out to me at dan@tomorrowsociety.com. Let me know what you're thinking of the show. And of course, you can follow me on the many social media platforms. Just go to Tomorrow Society. And I'm out there, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, YouTube, all the places you would expect to look. It's always awesome to know you're out there connecting with the show. Another thing you could do to really help out is just to spread the word about the show, whether it's sharing on social media, telling your family at Christmas time if it randomly comes up. Anything you can do to let people know about the podcast is so awesome and makes such a big difference. The music you are hearing right now was written by the extremely talented Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Next time, I am going to leave it a mystery. I am super excited for you to hear next week's show. We're only a week away, but if you are interested in Epcot Center and films about Disney history, I think you're really going to enjoy it. It was a treat for me. You'll have to wait another week to find out more about this next episode. Thank you again for listening to this podcast with Seth Kubersky, and I will talk to you again very soon.